My name is Piper. I'm 32 years old. For 6 years, I've worked as an emergency room physician at Portland Regional Medical Center. But to my family, I was never Dr. Piper. I was the girl who played nurse for a living. That's the phrase my mother used at every holiday dinner, every birthday, every single gathering. And then, at my nephew's birthday party, I watched him slip off a dock and go under. I was the one who pulled him back. And 20 minutes later, standing in the waiting room of my own hospital, my supervisor walked up, looked at me, and called out one word that made my mother's head snap around so fast I heard her neck crack. Dr. Jenkins, if you truly love and appreciate your parents, take just 1 second to subscribe to this channel. It means a lot to us. And before you go, tell me in the comments, which country are you watching from? It wasn't that my family didn't know the truth. They knew. They'd seen my white coat hanging in the hall closet. They'd seen the diploma from medical school. They knew I'd spent 4 years in undergrad, 4 more in med school, 3 grueling years in residency before I ever set foot in an ER as an attending physician. None of that mattered. In their eyes, I was still the anxious teenager who used to faint at the sight of blood, the one they decided wasn't cut out for real medicine. So when I became a doctor, they simply rewrote the story to fit the version of me they were comfortable with. Easier to mock than to admit they'd misjudged me for over a decade. My brother Grant was the golden child. Commercial real estate, good money, a wife named Denise, who fit seamlessly into my mother's idea of a perfect daughter-in-law. They had a son, Theo, who'd just turned 5. Theo was the one relative who never once asked me to explain my job. To him, I was just Aunt Piper, the one who let him stay up late watching cartoons and always had gummy bears in her purse. That summer, Grant threw a big lake party for Theo's birthday. My parents flew in. Denise's family came up from California. It was supposed to be a perfect weekend, sun and water and barbecue smoke drifting over the lake. I almost didn't go after a brutal stretch of overnight shifts. But Theo called me himself, insisting the party wasn't a party without Aunt Piper. That was enough to get me in my car. The first day went exactly as I expected. My mother introduced me to Denise's relatives with the same tired line. "This is my daughter, Piper. She plays nurse at the hospital." A woman I'd never met tilted her head and asked if I liked taking blood pressure. I just smiled and said it was rewarding work. By the second afternoon, most of the adults had drifted to the deck with their drinks, while the kids stayed by the water. I was at a picnic table, scrolling through a text about Monday's schedule when I heard it. That particular silence right before someone realizes something is wrong. Then Denise's scream. I was up and moving before I even processed what I'd heard. Theo had slipped off the dock into deeper water and gone under. By the time I reached the shoreline, another guest had pulled him out, but he wasn't breathing. His lips had already taken on a faint bluish tint, his small body limp on the sand, his mother screaming his name over and over. Everything else fell away. The party noise, the panic, the relatives frozen in horror. None of it existed anymore. I dropped to my knees, tilted his chin, checked his airway, and began rescue breaths, counting compressions the way I'd done hundreds of times before, except this time it was Theo's small chest under my hands. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably less than 90 seconds, he coughed, sputtered, and pulled in a ragged breath of his own. The ambulance arrived 12 minutes later. Theo was conscious, crying, clinging to his mother. I climbed into my own car to follow behind, hands still trembling. On the way, I overheard my mother on the phone with my aunt, already rewriting what had happened. Piper was there, thank God. Lucky our babysitter knew a little CPR. I didn't correct her. I was too focused on getting inside. But the moment we walked through those doors, there was no rewriting what happened next. We pushed into the waiting room of Portland Regional, my hospital, my department. The ER I'd worked in for 6 years. That's when I heard a voice I knew instantly, calling out across the room. Dr. Jenkins. It was Dr. Reyes, the care chief, my supervisor, stopping mid-stride with a clipboard in his hand, clearly confused why I was standing there in shorts and a t-shirt instead of scrubs. My mother's head snapped toward me so fast I heard her neck crack. Then his eyes moved to Theo on the stretcher, to Denise's tear-streaked face, to my mother frozen beside me, and understanding settled over his face. "Wait, is this your family? Are you the one who got him breathing again?" The waiting room went completely silent. My mother's mouth opened, no words coming out. Grant, who just walked in behind us, stopped mid-step, staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time in his life. "Yes," I said simply, keeping my voice professional. Witnessed submersion. Approximately 90 seconds of unresponsiveness. Performed rescue breaths and compressions until spontaneous respiration returned. He's been alert and stable since, but I wanted him evaluated for secondary complications. Dr. Reyes nodded, already calling over a resident. But before he walked off, he turned back and said the words that would replay in my mother's mind for years. Honestly, Piper, this doesn't surprise me one bit. You're one of the best I've ever watched run a resuscitation. Whatever they're paying you isn't enough. Then he clapped a hand on my shoulder and disappeared down the hallway. For a long moment, nobody in my family said anything. My mother's face went through several shades: confusion, disbelief, something uncomfortably close to embarrassment. It was Denise who finally broke the silence. He called you doctor. He said you run resuscitations. Piper, I thought. She stopped herself, glancing at my mother, then back at me. I thought you were a nurse. I'm an ER physician, I said quietly. I have been for 6 years. I went to medical school, did my residency, passed my boards. I'm not sure how that got lost somewhere along the way, but it did. My mother finally found her voice, smaller than I'd ever heard it. I just always called it nursing. I don't know, Piper. I never really understood the difference. I didn't mean anything by it. I could have let that slide the way I always had before. But something about watching my own nephew lying motionless on the sand, about counting compressions on his small chest while my family stood frozen with no idea what to do, had burned away whatever patience I had left for making myself smaller just to keep the peace. You've known the difference for 6 years, Mom. You came to my white coat ceremony. You have a photo of me in my graduation gown on your refrigerator. This wasn't confusion. It was easier for you to call it playing nurse than to admit your daughter became a doctor without your help, without your encouragement, and honestly, without much support from this family at all. Grant, of all people, spoke next. She's right, he said quietly, looking at our mother, then at me. Piper, I'm sorry. I've made jokes about it for years, and I never once thought about what it actually meant. You just saved my son's life on a beach with your bare hands, and the first thing we did was make sure everyone at that party knew you were the babysitter. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. For the first time in longer than I could remember, my brother looked at me like someone he respected instead of someone he tolerated. Denise reached for my hand, her grip tight, still shaking with adrenaline. Thank you, she said. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there. I didn't need the apology to feel vindicated. I'd spent years building a career that mattered, saving lives in a department most people only saw in their worst moments. That truth never depended on whether my family acknowledged it at a lake party or in a hospital waiting room. But hearing them finally say it out loud, watching my mother's face crumble under the weight of years of careless words, did something to loosen a knot in my chest I hadn't realized was still tied so tight. Theo was discharged that evening, perfectly fine, already asking if he could have ice cream for being so brave. My mother hugged me longer than she had in years before we left. And though I knew old habits didn't disappear overnight, something had shifted. At the next family dinner, when my aunt asked what I did for a living, I watched my mother answer before I even opened my mouth. She's an emergency room doctor, she said. And for once there was no laughter behind it, no joke, just quiet, simple pride.